People love stories. Now, whether that's through TV, movies, music, or just writing, it depends on the person. But over the last years, the art of storytelling has evolved into much more lifelike and fleshed out stories. The different ways you can tell stories has evolved as well. Now, pretty much anyone can write a book if they set their mind to it. Stories can be told through a television, or headphones, read on paper or a screen. But one thing is for certain, people love stories. People also love telling stories, whether you like writing or not. Stories have become a central and often very memorable part of our life. I love stories as well. I love taking in stories, but I also love telling them. I am a writer myself, but I don't just tell stories through words on paper. I love telling them through video, just like this. I'm an artist. I tell stories through my art. I love making music, and I tell stories through that too. There are many great stories that I've come to love over the past years, stories that have helped me create my own, or stories that I have just enjoyed. Whether that's the epic, tragic, yet uplifting story of George Lucas's Star Wars saga, the beautifully written characters from Nicole Conway's Dragon Rider Chronicles, the hilarious and well-written relationships in Merlin, the incredible world and friendships that just make me cry every time from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. But through all of these stories I've been told, there is one that holds a very special place. A story with an incredible world and an amazing plot. But most of all, a story whose characters are the most beautifully written characters I have ever seen, and friendships between those characters that are even more so. This story is Avatar, The Last Airbender. People have said it before, time and time again, so I don't really feel the need to rub it in. But yes, Avatar, The Last Airbender is a kids' show. But though it is meant for a younger audience, the amount of character depth put into the show is so far beyond most shows for an older audience. And I'm not going to say that it's far beyond every show, because I'm sure that there's another one out there who can stand on par with Avatar. But I have yet to hear of one. However, from what I've seen, the characters are miles beyond any other story I've heard. But then the question comes, why? Why is it that this story is so good? There are 3 elements of storytelling that must be mastered if you want to create a good story, and Avatar just completely nails all of them. So what are these elements?
Okay, first time flyers, hold on tight. Appa, yip yip. Come on, Appa, yip yip.
Wow, that was truly amazing.
We can actually explore these elements through each of the 3 books. Now, just as a disclaimer, these elements correlate to the books on a spectrum. If book 1 is world building, that doesn't mean that book 2 has no world building at all. It just means that book 2, at least for me, focused and did a better job on something other than world building. Book 1. I gave it away already just a second ago, so you probably already guessed it. Book 1, world building. Book 1 is usually considered the black sheep of the Avatar series. Well, except for Korra's book 2.
Korra's back! And she's a blue giant!
That's a discussion for another time. Book 1 is largely agreed by the fandom to be not as good as its successors. A large degree of that is due to the fact that it is the very first book, and the creators were still figuring out how everything behaves in the world they just created. But despite a few hiccups and the abundance of its filler chapters, I believe that Book 1 is massively underrated. Although a lot of fans dislike the first chapter, which is understandable, I rather like it. In fact, it is number 12 on my Avatar ranking list, which you can find a link to in the description if you so wish. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Iceberg, is the very first installment to the series, and it sets up the characters and the world geniusly. Although we aren't talking about characters just yet, I do want to touch on how carefully and delicately it introduces and sets up its characters. The first characters you meet isn't even the protagonist, Aang himself. It's who will eventually become his companions, and this is genius. In stories, even if all the characters are bland, we can usually at least connect with the protagonist even a little. But by setting up a connection with its side characters, we care about them as well. Before I begin rambling again, though, back to the world building. We'll be back for the characters soon. The main complaint I hear with Book 1 is the abundance of its filler chapters, or at the very least, chapters that are not central to the plot. And I do agree on this. Even though Avatar does have a lot of filler in later books, they work. Chapters like the desert or the beach, for example, have nothing really to add to the plot, and you could skip, really not miss much, at least in terms of plot. However, by skipping these, you miss the whole point of the show, which is character. Which I will get into this later, but returning to Book 1 for now. The filler chapters don't have much to offer in terms of character growth, which is why they are usually discounted. However, they do have something to offer in terms of world building. You see, chapters like this are most common in westerns or shows like The Mandalorian. Another example would be Star Wars in general. Although not exactly filler, everything outside the movies and TV shows, like the Knights of the Old Republic games, strengthen not the plot of Star Wars as in Luke and Anakin's story, but strengthen the believability of the world. This is why the Star Wars universe is probably the best example of world building there is. Now, after going on a small tangent, returning to Avatar, nearly half this book is chock full of filler chapters. But if we look at all the chapters in Book 1, it isn't really any of the main plot essential episodes that give us the world. For example, Chapter 4, Warriors of Kyoshi, doesn't really further the plot. We don't even know the plot of the series until Chapter 8. But this chapter introduces us to the Avatar Kyoshi, Kyoshi Island, and Suki. Suki would become vital to the plot in later chapters. The next two chapters, we enter the Earth Kingdom. The show introduces us to Bumi and the city Omashu. Imprisoned also shows us for the first time how the Fire Nation is oppressing people. And in Jet, we meet the Freedom Fighters, as well as seeing, again, the effects of Fire Nation oppression. You see, through all these chapters, which are discounted as filler chapters, they really do serve a purpose. They're not just there because the creators needed extras. Well, I say that.
Wait, here they come!
Okay, almost all of them. Now, real quick, I'm not saying that, oh, these chapters are actually so amazing and nobody should hate them. They are perfect the way they are and they should never be changed. Shame on you haters. No. These chapters, honestly, are not as good as I'd like them to be, but I'm trying to show that no matter how much we all may dislike or even hate these chapters, they do exist there for a reason. However, executing them in a different fashion could have definitely made them far more enjoyable. But again, like I said, the creators were just figuring out how everything worked in this world. All this talk on filler, and I haven't even mentioned the world building in the finale. At the very beginning, we're introduced to the Southern Water Tribe. Now the book ends on the Northern Water Tribe. Noting the differences between the Northern and Southern tribes is important, but also noting how at this point in time they have a respect for each other. Which, interestingly, this changes in the sequel comic North and South, and continues on into Korra as well. And all this North and South stuff, and I didn't even mention the spirit world. Aang enters the spirit world once again, and we see it in a little different way. We meet Ko and learn about Tui and La. Not to mention, we also learn from Yue about the origins of waterbending. The moon. How genius is that? The world building in Book 1, though the execution could be improved, is great, and starting with world building as a foundation is a great idea. Now again, the three storytelling elements exist on a spectrum when correlating to the different books, and I'm not saying that books 2 and 3 didn't do a great job with their world building, And I'm certainly not saying the other books didn't just do a phenomenal job of character work, because they most certainly did.
Iroh is a traitor, and your brother Zuko is a failure. I have a task for you.